Hello, everybody, and welcome to my next Inspire the Mind interview. And I'm joined this week by Angie Belcher. And I actually first came across her work because there was a lovely article about her in the New Statesman, which I also contribute to. And I was really struck by her really innovative and exciting approach to using stand-up comedy as a therapeutic answer to some mental health issues. So I'm really delighted to have Angie join me today. Stand-up comedian, poet, writer, author, and general all-round good thing. And maybe we're even going to have some laughs. Welcome, Angie.
Hello, hiya.
Great. So Angie, just tell us a little bit more, set the scene. Where are you right now? How's your day been going? Just so we have a little bit sense of your life and environment.
I'm in my kitchen in Bristol. This morning I've been in meetings all morning, so I'm a little bit meetinged out. I work as comedian in residence at the University of Bristol, so I've been on a Zoom with my boss this morning because we were in the middle of creating a project with Ellie there, and the project at the moment is the Bristol Comedy History Walk. So it's a walking tour of Bristol, taking in some of its kind of lesser known stories, and not the kind of like big picture stuff, but kind of the stories that some people might miss on some of the other walks that have happened around there. It's not a traditional walk. Oh. And but it's with the theatre department, so it's a piece of theatre as well. So I'm writing that at the moment, which is really exciting.
So that sounds fabulous, and that's another reason I'm interested in your work, because my daughter is actually a medic. She's a fourth year medic at Bristol University. So I'm quite often in Bristol, and it's an amazing city. And actually that also speaks to sort of the diversity of your work, because you've actually got so many different sort of strings to your bow. But can we just focus for a bit on this idea of teaching people to be stand-up comedians? Could we just rewind, maybe right back where this sort of story started, even right back to your childhood? Was it always part of your makeup to make people funny? I read a couple of interviews or on your website that, I don't know, maybe did you say you're a little bit bullied sometimes at school, and that was an answer, was to be funny? Or maybe I was reading about other people. But yeah, tell me a bit more about where the story started.
That was about the inner comedian model, which was a theory that I've developed. So just to go back further, the comedy on referral is the process of learning stand-up comedy to help people recover from trauma. And so that's the thing that I was in the New Statesman about. That's the thing that went viral in January. I think it was just because it was a slow news week, but it did go a bit crazy. And I was in a lot of newspapers and on the telly and in the Daily Mail.
Maybe that's because,
which apparently is a good thing.
Yeah, but it really spoke to people, didn't it? So I think that's really interesting, sort of drill down why it kind of had such resonance. But yes, so comedy referral is the particular name of this sort of approach of teaching people to stand up comedians. Yeah. So and sorry, so you were saying that the bullying thing was just, that was the idea that you had an inner comedian which might help address bullying.
So what it was, a lot of the work when I first started out writing the course was about using your narrative and using who you are to write stand-up comedy. And I felt for this particular client group that was a little bit limiting, because you don't want to at the end of the course go, well, there you go, you create something funny, bye, have a nice life. I wanted to give them some sort of practical way that they could use what they'd learned in your real everyday life. And so I kind of used, similarly to transactional analysis, which I presume you know about, Rachel, is that we all have these different people inside of us. And when we're feeling down, when we're feeling traumatized, when we're feeling depressed, sometimes we can take some of our kind of like not as useful to ourselves versions of us out. Yeah. So I was saying that one of my go-to roles that I use is my bullied teenager. And sometimes I go out and I take her with me. She's not very nice and she's reactive, and she can be quite angry. She doesn't give people a lot of grace because she's my bullied teenager. And so if you take your inner comedian out, you take your willingness to connect with the world and to be a hero and to bring joy and playfulness to your life, which I know kind of sounds a little bit like pop psychology, but we'd learned all this stuff, and often people weren't going to then become stand-up comedians. So what were they going to do with this knowledge? But I would say you can still take your comedic sense of self out to the supermarket, or you can take it out to the to visit your in-laws who you know are really annoying. You know, every time you've got to go out and make connections, rather than take that bit of you that's angry about something or upset, take your inner comedian out.
I love that. That's really nice. And just so when you say, you know, that's quite personal to you, that identity you had as a bullied teenager. So you were growing up in the Wirral, is that right? Was that where you were brought up? In the Midlands.
In the Midlands.
Okay.
I know my accent. Sometimes people guess that I'm kind of from that end of the country, yeah. But I come from a place called, I was born in Wednesbury in the West Midlands in the Black Country, which then was the second most deprived area in the UK. I went to a pretty tough comprehensive, which was renowned really for being hard work as a pupil and as a teacher. Some people have told me, I've had friends who've gone there to teach who said it been tough. And they got bullied a lot. And I think that's that kind of, then kind of, I don't think people did a lot about bullying then back then. So yeah, I think my bullied teenager is still with me based on those experiences.
Yeah, how interesting. And was acting already part of your life, like growing up there, and was there much theatre in the comprehensive, or not particularly? Did that come later on?
Well, it's really weird. I went to do a presentation a couple of weeks ago in Birmingham for a big conference called Serious About Comedy there. And I bumped into this woman who I got talking to, and I realised she was my old director from when I was 14. We had this community play come, and it was a funded thing whereby it was professionals and just local school kids, and it changed my life, this play. And so it's why I've always been a big lover of community arts and community theatre, because it can make people just turn them onto the arts in a way that they might not have had. I didn't have families who could afford to take me to the theatre. We didn't go and audition for things. I didn't go to exhibition until I was in my 20s. We didn't it wasn't the kind of thing that we did. And also we lived a long way from everything. We didn't have a car, all that kind of thing, working class upbringing. And to have a professional theatre company come in and work with us and act with us, and we put on this amazing play all about Chartism in the Midlands. And that was something that was really important.
And sort of drilling down, what was it about that theatrical experience? Was it sort of kind of firing your imagination, a kind of escapism, or that there was other possibilities, different people you could be? What really sort of hit you hard with that kind of, as you say, that kind of excitement of that experience?
I think a little bit is just the kind of excitement of being backstage and being in a chorus and being part of a team. Yeah. But also I just I loved being on stage. I loved seeing the audience. I was a little bit of a drama queen in the making. I think that I kind of wanted to kind of have that attention, I think.
Yeah, that sounds really like me. The best moment of my whole life really was when I did Guys and Dolls and I was Adelaide. I don't know if you ever seen it. Yeah, yes. I mean, I can still do all the tunes. Marry the man today, maybe he's leaving town. Yeah, I so get that. In fact, I'm getting slightly goosebumpy. That, as you say, that feeling of connectedness, that feeling of being part of a team, and just, yeah, it is just such a thrill. So keep going, less of me. So you've gone to the comprehensive, you've had a sort of flirtation and excitement around theatre. What do you do then? Go to university, or where does your life take you next?
Yes, my dad died when I was 18, which meant that I had some money to go to university. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to afford to go. So it was quite, it's quite horrible, really, isn't it? Luckily, my dad died, and so I could go to university. So we had a bit of funding for that. But I didn't do anything to do with theatre or performance at university because my parents just didn't really think it was a thing. You know what I mean? They weren't very supportive. They didn't, because they, you know, the conscious competence model. They weren't aware that you could do that for a thing. For them, they worked in a factory, and so just working in an office was like going to be the big thing. You know what I mean? You can do anything you want, my mum said, but don't work in a factory, because that was what they did. You know. Yeah. So in a way, they could do anything really, but they weren't really. Acting wasn't on there. So I did sociology and social policy.
Okay, so you were already sort of edging to sort of an interest in a way in psychology and what makes us tick as a society. You were kind of on, you know, that was already something that you were interested. By the way, you mentioned something there. You said conscious competence or something.
Conscious competence.
Yeah. Just tell us
the conscious competence model.
Yeah.
So the conscious competence model is a model of learning new things. So when you first start out learning anything at all, you are unconsciously uncompetent, which means you don't know anything and you don't know what you don't know. And then you become consciously incompetent, whereby you realise how thick you are. And then you become consciously competent, so you know what you do. And then unconsciously competent, where you don't realise how brilliant you are.
I love it. I've never heard of that. I mean, I am very interested in psychology, but I didn't know that. Yeah, it's fascinating. The idea you didn't even know it was a topic, and then you realize it's a topic and that you don't know anything about the topic. Yeah, I'm a bit like that at the moment. I'm writing about adolescence, and I'm just, it's such a journey of discovery. There's just so many things that I didn't even know what happens to young teenagers. Okay, so we've got, you've done you've done your degree, you've done your what did you say, sociology
And social policy.
social policy, right? Okay.
I wanted to be I decided I was going to be a social worker. So if I couldn't be an actor, I decided I was going to be a social worker and work with homeless people. That's what I decided.
So you did have a kind of strong feeling of making a difference from pretty early on. I mean, you were wanting to help others.
I think actually I was trying to help myself.
Nice.
You know,
okay.
I was trying to tend to the kind of, I think I had quite a traumatic childhood in some respects. I think I think it was a tough childhood, to be honest with you. And kind of my dad was very much a Victorian dad, and just living in a council house. There was no, the school I went to had no inspiration or aspiration. And so I felt like a bit like, you know, that Harry Potter feeling of like your real family is somewhere else, who are kind of like they're there and they've got someone else and they're missing this writing. I was writing scripts when I was a teenager, and I won a national script writing competition when I was 14. And I think, but I just don't know where I got it from. I don't know where I got it from. The only thing I can think of when people say to me, where do you get your sense of comedy from, is that my mom was just a naturally funny person.
Right. I love, when I've been reading up about you, I really like that idea that you sort of shared, that actually we might not think we're funny, and it might seem a million miles away that any of us could be stand-up comedians, but actually there's comedy in all of our lives, sort of all the time, in how we sort of, you know, you come in from a day at work, you have your cup of tea, and then you start telling your partner, and you know, even how you decide to frame that, and oh god, let me tell you about this. I like that idea, because I think I also do quite a lot with poetry, and I think sometimes maybe comedy is a bit like poetry. People think it's not for them.
Completely. When people say to me, oh, who's your favorite comedian? I want to name one of my girlfriends, to be honest with you, who consistently makes me laugh. It's but as human beings are really funny, and it's a different skill to do it on the stage. I've got friends who just, I invite them around just because I know that they'll cheer me up, because they say the most brilliant things that'll make me laugh.
And I remember not being quite sure about whether to marry my husband. I hope he's not listening. He doesn't listen, so that's all right. But and this friend of mine said, well, why not? Because he makes you laugh. You know, what's joy if it's not laughter? But you know, so I married him, so that was good. And he does make me laugh. But it's interesting. So what is it about laughter? I mean, we know that sort of oxytocin boost, you know, you get a kind of, you know, hormonal charge. I don't know if you like this idea, which this sort of like anxiety is partly, you know, we're worried about the future, or we're regretting the past, we're not in the present, and you know, we're always somebody else in our mind. But when you're laughing, that's like the one time you're fully present. I don't know what you think about that.
Completely, which is why I've got this theory how, you know, no one ever remembers the name of the comedian. You'll go, you know, that person who, and even I do it with my friends who are comedians as well, you can never remember. And the reason why is that when you're watching live comedy, you have to be in the moment for it, and therefore you have to forget what you've just heard in order to be present for this. You can't even think about what you're going to have for dinner tonight or what you're doing tomorrow, because you need to really commit to this. It's a big ask of audiences. They have to listen really hard in a way that music audiences don't have to. In fact, music audiences are allowed to chat, they're allowed to join in, you know, we just don't, it doesn't require that. But spoken word, poetry, stand-up comedy requires a listening audience.
Yeah, I like that, because again, yeah, I often think that with poetry, you've got to sort of unpick meaning, and you've got to, you know, you've got to work on, you know, what's the real communication there. And sometimes that's true of humor, isn't it? Because like that thing when you don't get the joke, and you're sort of like, you're really focused, and sometimes you just don't get it, and then you get it, and then woof, you kind of,
but then you miss the next thing that's said, because you're so busy working out that thing, you'll miss the next joke.
Yeah, so it does sort of require an intense focus. Tell me more about that point you just made. So like that sort of quotidian everyday humor that we all have, though maybe don't recognize. Maybe that's back to your point of the sort of what was that thing? Conscious
competence. Yeah,
conscious competence. We didn't even know it was a topic. So maybe that's true of our sort of, but I'd like to talk about that difference between that everyday gift, maybe we have, but we're not consciously aware of, to switching to being a sort of on-stage stand-up comedian? I mean, and how is that different?
I'm coaching a CEO of a big company at the moment because he's got to do a big video for his company. And it's really interesting. I always say to people, it's really weird. It'll go to bits when that camera comes out. And like the difference between when they're talking to me and doing it to when the camera comes out and when I'm actually coaching them, suddenly you forget who you are, you forget where your hands are, you forget what your voice is. And that's because the thing with this particular advert that I'm coaching on and with stand-up comedy is that it's you've got what you think is normally funny that you chat about with your friends. Then you've got the writing of it that turns into performance. And then with stand-up comedy or anything where you have to kind of seem like you're authentic and it's impromptu, is you then have to make it sound like you've just had that idea. So first of all, that process takes ages. Which is why if you ever seen a comedian and you think, oh gosh, they get paid a lot for just doing 20 minutes, the amount of work that's gone in to make that 20 minutes seem like the most impromptu, off the cuff, kind of authentic, kind of like, oh, I just had an idea, you know, is a long process. And also with stand-up comedy, because you need an audience to then give you immediate feedback, which is, do they laugh or do they not laugh, which is the whole job of a stand-up comedian, really, is kind of like in the moment is to kind of create laughter, and not just laughter occasionally, but laughter at particular parts. And so that is the bit that makes it hard, really, is that in theatre, I always say it's more poetic than poetry and more theatrical than theatre, because you could, in poetry, like with poetry, you can ruin stand-up comedy with the wrong word. You can like put a pause in the wrong place and you can ruin it. And it's more theatrical than theatre because it is just one person on a stage. So even if you did a theatre show or your musicals that you spoke of, you have props, you have lights, you have costumes, you have 10 other people on stage with you, you have a director often and a producer. Stand-up comedy, you might have a director, you might have a lighting designer if you're lucky, you know, you might have a tour manager if you're at that level of UK or world level. But normal everyday gigging stand-up comedian, it's just them getting that immediate feedback, and it's a place of responsibility and it's a place of power, but it's just you, so you really feel the weight of that.
I really get that. Oh, wow, as you say, nowhere to hide, you know, just you on the stage. Loads of thoughts coming to me when you were chatting there. So yeah, I like that idea that what can seem effortless and easy is often by far the most work. And that's true when I'm a writer and a journalist, and you know, George Orwell said this as well, that the you know, the best writing seemed as though it was easy, whereas, you know, so it's harder to write for the Sun than it is for the Guardian. So the more easy and simple the writing seems, actually that's where more work's gone into it. So I really get that idea that you've got this sort of well, it's slightly different, but you know, this idea that it's sort of effortless and easy, but actually a huge amount of legwork's gone into that, which I think is probably why cartoonists, for example, they're the best paid people on a newspaper, because it's really hard to be that funny. But what I was thinking is, so you're on stage and you made that point about the connection with the audience. I mean, what do you do if they don't laugh?
You go back and you write something better.
Okay, so you just have to, maybe that's interesting psychological work for you, that you can't have a sort of perfectionist attitude. You've got to, you know, stumbling blocks have got to be stepping stones. You've got to be constantly thinking, well, if that didn't work, I'll just keep at this.
In the moment, to be honest with you, the audience loves it when it messes up. They love it because it shows your humanity and your vulnerability. And I always say to people, the more you can show your real, honest, true self, what is really going on in your belly, the more your audience believes in you and loves you, and therefore they're more likely to laugh. And so what a lot of comedians is, they go meta, as in they kind of go, oh dear, well, that didn't work then. And that always gets a bigger laugh than the thing that was supposed to get the laugh. So it all gets a little bit layers on layers on layers, you know. And you often see some stand-up comedians who will actually literally, you can see the way they physically shape themselves to become that other person. So the stand-up is going there, the joke goes badly, they then turn to the audience as this person and say, oh, that didn't go very well, did it? The audience laughs, and then they can have a conversation with the other person. So there's them and there's them watching them, and it gets a little bit kind of crazy.
I love that, because I do quite a lot of public speaking myself. So next time I muck up, I just go, oh, well, that didn't go very well. I sometimes see like,
because your audience knows, your audience is there thinking, oh dear, that didn't work like she wanted.
Yeah.
And if you leave them on tender hooks, they will stay on tender hooks for you. Whereas if you kind of go, oh my God, that just completely messed up, wasn't supposed to do that, let's try again. They kind of go, oh, she knows, it's okay, we're all on the same page now, we're all in the group together. It's all group dynamic stuff.
No, because I sometimes do talks about nutrition and well-being, and I get people to eat, one person to eat a chocolate bar, and then after 23 minutes they're supposed to have a bit of a mood swing because it's mucked around with their insulin. So you go to that person, you say, how's your mood? And they're supposed to say, actually pretty flat, because you know, all the whatever, complicated. And then they say, no, I'm feeling great. And you go, oh dear. You weren't supposed to say that. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But back on
tell them off, tell them they've done it wrong. We weren't supposed to say that.
yeah, exactly. But back on theme, because you made that point, which I was also reading about. So this idea of sort of exposing vulnerability, and then that gives a kind of connection, because it's sort of our common humanity, and people really connect with that, and that's a good thing. But working therapeutically, and I think this is something you've also been really interesting about, you know, what are the dangers of that, you know, overly kind of descending into our vulnerable persona, and you know, it doesn't work.
It's more about whether you're prepared to do it, you know. Like Brene Brown, I often quote Brene Brown, who kind of, you know, she's a woman who does amazing TED Talks. She's an inspirational, motivational leader, and really into opportunity and women and diversity. She's amazing, but she also talks in her podcast and online about the fact that she, you know, kind of her sexual preferences, shall we say. I'm trying to stay really adult for you here, by the way, Reg.
No, you don't have to.
No, let's keep it clean. Let's keep it clean. It's only 1 o'clock on a Wednesday.
Otherwise, it makes me look like I'm this really sort of uptight, sort of boring kind of, you know, conventional interviewer.
When Brene Brown was challenged on that and kind of said, why are you telling people about your sex life? And she says, well, the thing is, then I'm in control of the narrative. No one can ever turn around to me and say, oh, I found out this about you. Because you're like, yeah, because I talk about it. I tell you. So you can't, it takes the power out of the dirty secrets that we have, you know. So what I say to stand-ups is you're completely in control of what you say on the stage. It has to be your decision. However, you know, if we look at, for example, Jihadis Window, the more we move into that, what Jihadis calls the open space, the more awareness we have. Yeah, if we keep everything closed and we don't share it and we keep it in, we'll never know if it's any good or if it's going to be useful to someone. It's kind of, it's a closed space, we don't know. So therefore I urge people to take risks, or just small ones to begin with, you know, baby steps of kind of going, talk about something that actually makes you uncomfortable, talk about death, talk about sex, talk about those things that you kind of go, oh, I wouldn't normally talk about that on stage. I'm coaching someone at the moment, and there's something very personal to her that she's like, I don't want to talk about this on stage because I don't want to get too depressing. It's like, but actually if you mind that thing, it would be amazing, because a lot of people, comedy is not just about you. It's about, because it's a position of responsibility, you are doing it for your audience who can't do it. So therefore, I like to take risks on stage so that people come to me after they've seen me and they go, Angie, thanks for talking about your mum's dementia, because my mum's got dementia, and oh, it was just nice to hear someone talk about it on a stage and know that you feel the same feelings as me. It's those little connections. Stand-up comedy is about having a laugh. Obviously, it's about making audiences think that you're hilarious, but it's also about connecting on a human level, because the best Edinburgh shows aren't just the ones that are funny. It's the one that leaves that audience leaving the room going, wow, I'm going to do something differently because I've just seen someone talk about something and it's changed my life. Or I'd never heard someone talk about what it's like to be, you know, bisexual, or I never listened to someone who's talked about race in that way. Oh, I'm going to change my mind about that, as well as having, because laughter is a way to get people to think differently about stuff.
I like that. Yeah, again, loads of thoughts there. So yeah, I totally get that idea, by like your openness kind of elicits an openness in others, and then that's a lovely way of kind of, as you say. But what I don't know, I hadn't heard of that idea of Jihadis Window. Is that well known? Sorry, can you tell us what that means?
Jihadis Window, Joe Ingerman Luft, NLP. It's neuro-linguistic program, and it's a way of looking at how you manage the information that you give out in the world.
Okay. Well, I need to look at that. So the gist of it is shutting it in actually makes it more scary. Opening it up makes it easier, sort of thing.
You have more control over it then. If you kind of, so what I think the NLP technique in that was highlighting was there's things about ourselves that we don't know and other people don't know. And if we don't share them or try them out, then you'll never know. You can
Yeah.
take them out and you go, oh, that's terrible, we'll do that again. But you've tried it, you know. It's the idea that you regret things you don't do, not things that you do.
I like
Yeah.
that. Okay, so
Yes.
so in that idea of sort of telling your story, and obviously that's, I think that's just at the core, isn't it, of so many psychological therapies, which is that this idea that we all interpret things all along, and we always write our stories about what we feel has happened or our interpretation, and that we can change that story and we can change that interpretation, which is one way to sort of therapeutic healing. And maybe, yeah, sharing, as you say, that is also that kind of sharing your vulnerability. You know, in some ways it's relaxing, isn't it? Because you're not pretending to anything anymore. By revealing something, you haven't got to have a sort of double persona of pretending to something that's not. So all these are kind of quite understandable therapeutic ideas why sharing and being on stage could be helpful. What I'm trying to get at is, how does that actually link with the comedic element, in the sense that I know you've said that, and I love that the idea that the laughter is helping with the destigmatization, and just humor as a way of kind of moving on from shame. But could you just talk a bit more about how do those two things link? The sort of narrative story, reinterpreting your narrative story, where does the comedy kind of come in on that? Does that make any sense? Maybe not.
Not completely, but I'll talk and you can let me know if it's wrong. But I think it's
Yeah.
about processing. So if I was to take someone and teach them stand-up comedy,
Yeah.
I'd find out who they are, then I find out about themselves, I teach them comedic devices, I try and find out what kind of performer they are, and find out what they want to bring to the stage. And the process of doing that is one of mining, really, and editing. And that's very, very similar basically to what you would do if you went to a psychotherapist. And I'm not saying I'm a psychotherapist or a therapist in any kind of way, but it's a very similar process.
So you've nailed what I'm trying to say is, why is it different from me? Because I've had loads of therapy and I'm forever trying to rewrite my own story. What is it? Why would it be different if I came to you and I did that process, but would you be finding funny nuggets all the time, or why would it be different?
No, because you would find the funny. I would give you the tools to find the funny in it. I would never say, I rarely ever say, oh, I know it would be a good joke for you. I try desperately. Sometimes if I'm like going, look, this is an offer, don't take it. Because the idea is that you have to develop your own stand-up comedy. I'd never really tell you how to write it. I'll give you the tools to do it, the devices, talk you through the lot of theories, but yeah.
And why would that help me to find bits of my life funny?
People, when they first come to me, well, most people, I'd say, already think there's some funny things to be had there. It's just a process of them getting it match fit in terms of stand-up comedy. Because a funny story on its own is not stand-up. Stand-up is a way of consistently making something funny, yeah? And often when we tell stories, when we relay the story again, we might miss out details, or there might be a bit where it gets really boring because people get bogged down in the detail that we don't really need, or the opposite happens, we forget to give the detail that we need in order to get the laugh out of that bit. So all we're really doing is taking someone's story and making it match fit for it to be called stand-up comedy.
So I get that that's what makes for a good performance, to have that refining, and as you say, sort of tools and your guidance to kind of what is funny and how to do that and help the other person find their jokes. But just back to, for example, your Bristol scheme that you were running alongside the NHS. What is the therapeutic value to that process of that kind of mining, as just, you know, that description you just gave?
Yeah. Well, I can just tell you about the feedback, I suppose, that the participants gave me. Would that be useful? Does that feel more analytical and scientific? I feel like I'm going to get scientific with you, Rachel.
Yeah, no, I'd love to hear it. Yeah.
It was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful, Rachel. And when I think about it, I'm going to cry. I might have a little cry now. You're a therapist. You can guide me through it. It was so lovely. It was so nice because it was spot on what I wanted. And I didn't read it for ages. I got the feedback in, and I left it a few weeks because I just thought, I don't know why did I leave it a few weeks? You know, normally I'd be like, I really want to know what they say. But I left it a few weeks before I read it. And I just needed to have a little bit of space, it felt like, as if I could kind of come to it with fresh eyes.
These were the 15 participants or so in the Bristol scheme. Right, yeah.
Yeah. And so they said things like, lots of people said they felt better.
Yeah.
There's that really simplistic thing of I feel better, I feel better, I feel better by doing this course.
Yeah.
Other people said that they felt like, I'm trying to remember the word exactly, they felt like trying to get they want more for themselves because of that course. They felt like there's more to be had from life, and they wanted to try and have a better life because of it, which is kind of, I suppose, what, in terms of healthcare, we treat people in healthcare, but also we're always into preventative stuff, aren't we? And kind of resilience going forward. And what I can't change people's trauma, and I never wanted to do that. I wanted to get them to a place whereby they could have a look at the things that were important to them, and that going forward they'd realise that comedy can help you in that terms of that, you know, the inner comedian. So people felt better, they connected with people, and they said they felt less alone, and that it was something that they looked forward to every week.
That's interesting. Just for anyone joining, I'm chatting to Angie Belcher, who's a stand-up comedian, poet, author, and we're trying to drill down on exactly what is it about the comedic element that is just so therapeutically valuable. Angie's just been sharing some ideas there. That must just have been so lovely, because that was that the first time you've done it in that very sort of more formal way, or with a large group anyway. Is that right?
It's the first time I taught people in recovery from trauma. Normally I teach in universities. I teach the worried well, which are often very moneyed women who've got stand-up comedy on their bucket list, darling. You know what I mean? I teach people that are all right and doing okay, financially, emotionally, you know, on the whole, or they're young 18-year-olds, and I'm teaching them how to do stand-up comedy. It's the first time I said, I want traumatized people in the room. I want to find out, this is a research thing for me as well, I want to find out whether the process of learning stand-up comedy can help people in some way. And everyone got helped in different ways. But I was very up for, I think the first week it was really sticky, because I know this sounds mad, Rachel, but I asked for traumatized people and I got them. I think I didn't realize how traumatized they were going to be. There were people who didn't talk for 3 weeks, didn't even open their mouths, you know, properly, like, oh my God. And I started to question myself on whether I could pull this off.
Yeah. I mean, because you know, classic in therapy, you know, somebody like you're giving out a lot. How do you look after your own mental health to sort of kind of taking on a lot of other people's, you know, psychodramas?
I do the Guardian crossword. That's my favourite bit of my day, is going and sitting in the park and doing the Guardian crossword, because it empties my brain.
Yeah.
I have lots of nice friends that I go and talk to.
Yeah.
Drink beer, that helps. All sorts, really. But I don't think about myself too much. I just carry on. But you're right. I should look after myself more, Rachel. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're doing a load of things that, you know, all the studies say are really good for us. Like, you've got a purpose, you're making a difference, you're helping people. I mean, these are all thought to be really good factors for good well-being. You know, especially, you know, help us high, you know, you're making a difference. So tell me a bit more about how the future looks. I mean, you know, this was with the University of Bristol. So it's part of a sort of government, is that right? Or not with the University of Bristol? No, this was your
No,
it was with a different group.
it was my course that I designed.
Yeah, sure.
But the participants were referred by the social prescription team, which are referred by doctors.
Sure.
So your GP refers to the social prescription team, yeah.
So this is a big trend happening that I'm sure lots of our listeners know about, this whole idea that maybe we need to shift away from a sort of more medicalized pharmaceutical approach for some people, and more into this social prescribing. So it's things like gardening, mindfulness,
stand-up comedy.
So how can you get it? I mean, what's your hope? Would you like it to be a sort of standard thing, or are you happy just to have done this sort of like this one-off amazing study into trauma effectively?
Well, no, I'm taking it to lots of places at the moment, but the really big news this week is that Rethink have just given me some substantial funding to design and deliver a brand new course working in Northwest London with men at risk of suicide.
Wow.
So we're going to be working with men who've had certain identifying factors, and there's a lot of different ones, I think, isn't there? There's like death of a loved one, major illness. There's lots of different things that means that some men are, based on statistics, more likely to go and hurt themselves or kill themselves, you know. So I'm working with therapists and social workers and people with lived experience, because that's, you know, it's a co-production thing with lots of different organisations, and with Brentford Football Club as well. because
How
they do a lot of
fabulous.
outreach, because they have a lot of men that come. It's mostly men, I think, that come to their football matches. You can tell I don't know a lot about football, can't you? I've been
Yeah.
told this. I don't know.
Well, hats off.
They're in the first division. That's all I know. The Premiership. That's it.
But that's absolutely fabulous. Well done. I mean, congratulations. I'm an ambassador for Rethink Mental Illness, and I mean, I'm very proud of what they do. I work with them. I've just been working with them judging their poetry competition, actually. So they
Oh,
people,
fab,
yeah,
lovely.
write poetry therapeutically. But that's really interesting, isn't it? Because the sort of the trope normally is that women find it hard to be angry. You know, we're all, you know, we don't want to be shrews, and some people say depression's anger turned in, and then they say men find it hard to be vulnerable. I mean, very sweeping generalization, but maybe that links to your idea that there's this sort of maybe counterintuitive link between vulnerability and humor, that they go together.
Completely. And also, I think as a feminist, this is important to me, because, you know, people often go, oh, but men have it hard because of the suicide. I go, yes, that's because of the patriarchy. Do you not realize that the patriarchy harms men as well? We're getting very political here, and I know, Rachel, but the reason why, you know, this is happening is because we tell men to be strong and heroic, and it's not like that. All human beings have an array of different feelings, and they're all valid.
Yeah. So what's the timing on the Rethink thing? I'm watching my own timing. We're whizzing along. I sometimes bang on forever. So yeah, but tell me about the timing for this Rethink project.
I just won it this week, so I presume we'll probably have a couple of months running, and then we're going to actually design it with people who have been at risk of suicide or experienced self-harm, I imagine, in some way, or a close family member has died. So they're going to be helping me to design it, and I reckon maybe summertime we'll be delivering it.
Amazing. And it will be the same idea of teaching people to be stand-up comedians. It will be the same rough formula.
So it's the process of learning stand-up comedy to probably process emotions and think about our lives and our stories. Yeah.
Okay. And have the sort of health ministers come banging on your door yet? I mean, do you think it will go more mainstream within NHS, because it's something that maybe they could try and promote more?
I'd like to, yeah. I've heard that Keir Starmer's really interested in the project and wants to come to visit it.
Wow.
Health minister wise, I haven't had any health ministers contact me yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I welcome them. Health ministers, contact me.
I'm sure you will, because I do feel that there is such a hunger for different approaches. You know, there's a lot of worry and anxiety and suffering, and you know, and especially post COVID, on so many different groups, and people are really looking for new things and new ways of thinking about it. And we've had a very narrow approach, really. We've really basically, if you go to your GP, it's antidepressants or a bit of cognitive behavioral therapy. That's really all you're offered. And I think what I love about what you're doing is just we're so diverse, aren't we, as people, and what we need. And there could just be some people for whom working with comedy as therapy, that could just be the breakthrough.
It is, but at the same time, I've always been a big believer in all therapies therapeutic, if you do it in the right way. And a lot of this course has been connecting people together, having fun, playing games, listening, kind of taking time with people. And so some of it's just that I think, for me, the way to get people to open up and be brilliant stand-ups is by making an amazing connection between me and my coachee, or the workshop participant. It's about being that trustworthy person in the room that kind of goes, I can hold this for you. It's all going to be okay. My approach has always been comfort the afflicted, afflict the comforted, you know? So I want to challenge people, but I've also said to people, I know I'm a comedian, but also I'm a human being as well, and I'm not gonna I don't want to see you come to harm in this session. And while I might really try and challenge you, because that's my job, that you don't have to say anything or do anything you don't want to do. And the thing is, the more, one of my feedback things was actually, the more that they said, that the more that Angie said that we didn't have to do anything, the more they wanted to do something and actually do stand up.
Yeah, that's really nice. It sort of reminds me of that idea that there isn't much difference between all the different therapeutic approaches, whether they're Freudian or cognitive behavioral therapy. It's more about the relationship between the therapist and the person who's getting the help. And it also reminds me, so sometimes I run good mood food groups about nutrition and mental health, and sometimes I run poetry groups. And you're so right, in a way, yes, poetry's nice, food's nice, cooking together's nice, but a lot of it is holding the space, you know, that connection, the different people being together, not feeling so isolated, you know, sharing common experiences. And you're really there. Yes, there's a topic, but it's so much else as well, and you can't just narrow it down to one thing. But still, I think there's something clever as well about targeting men, because we know they don't get as much help generally, and maybe comedy as well. That's clever. It's not stigmatized, a bit like sport. I think
exactly, yeah. And it's going to be a way of targeting them without kind of saying, hey, do you want to come into a suicide group? Because who's want to go? I wouldn't want to go into that. So we're going to have to find a way to brand it so that we reach the right people, but without being overtly to do with suicide, because I don't think anyone would go near it. So I'm hoping that the people who've got connections at Rethink, at the social prescription teams and all that, will be able to identify the right men so we can get the help to them.
Yeah, well, you've just got to go online and just get your jolly beautiful face out there, and people seeing you, they'll just want to connect. I think that's what's going to happen. I don't think you're going to have a problem, to be honest. Anyway, don't expect to have a problem when you won't have one. Anyway, listen, I can't believe our hour is nearly coming to an end. We have whizzed along. I'm talking to Angie Belcher, stand-up comedian and all-round good person. Angie, so we're called Inspire the Mind, and normally sort of wrap up by just asking, really, is there just the one thing that really inspires you? Wake up in the morning, you think, oh, I've got to get going on my day, my work here. What really inspires you to keep going and keep doing this fabulous work?
I'm really interested in mindfulness, and there's no one more mindful than my 4-year-old little boy, because he just kind of lives in the moment and everything's fun. And so sometimes I try to copy him in the way that, like James Corden used to do that thing, like baby yoga, whereby you sit with a baby and you do everything they do, and it's actually a really hard workout. I try to do that, but emotionally with him. So when he's emotionally into something, I try to be as excited about that caterpillar that he is, rather than kind of go, yeah, caterpillar. And I kind of call it toddler mindfulness, whereby if you live like a toddler, you'll be so in the present, and you kind of don't worry about anything because you haven't really got any self-awareness yet, or sense of empathy or fear, which is a bit scary, which is why I'm always a little bit tired and like on edge. But also it's a beautiful place to be in.
Oh, well, listen, that is lovely. So anyone listening, take that away. Let's all be a bit more like a toddler. I'll try that. But I haven't got a toddler, though. What do you do if you haven't got a toddler? I've got a dog. I try to be like my dog.
I'll have him back when he's 16.
Beg, borrow, or steal. Well, yeah, brilliant. Listen, Angie Belcher, been my absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming on the chat, and all power to you. And can you tell us a joke to finish off with, or is that a really mean thing to do?
No, you'd have to come to one of my gigs and pay for the privilege.
Okay, fair dues. And I thought, if you'd asked me to tell a joke, I couldn't have done that, so there we go.
Well, you should come on one of my courses at angiescomedycourses.com, and I'll show you how to, Rachel.
Excellent. So you can find good point, Angie. You can find more about Angie's work online, and she's got an amazing website, and you can see clips of her incredible work. And so thank you very, very much, Angie.
Thanks for having me. Ta-ra.
Ta-ra.